uh, shelter-in-place restrictions that we have going on. Um, well, first let me go back. Thank you, Carmen, for the introduction. I really greatly appreciate it. All the help and support that you and Evelyn have given the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project over the years. You're really our first biggest supporters that we ever had when we started doing this, and funding for this presentation has been provided by Evelyn and Carmen for the benefit of the Association of Beverly Shores residents as well as other Lake Michigan water enthusiasts. So when we do our presentations, so this is going to be a little new for me. When we do our presentations, I might be doing it in a classroom where we have like 15 to 30 students. I might be in an auditorium where there could be up to 500 students. And we start every presentation with a survey. We call it a swimmer experience survey, where we'll ask just some real simple questions. People can show, by a show of hands, we'll ask how many people know how to swim. And on average, well over 90% will put their hands up in the air saying we know how to swim. Sometimes it might even be like 99, 100% people put their hands up in the audience saying that they know how to swim. And then get a little bit more experience out of them. How many have been in the ocean? We'll ask how many have been in one of the Great Lakes and how many have been in a pool. And what we find is that on average, well over 90% will say that they know how to swim. Usually about 65% will say that they've been in the ocean. 75% have been in one of the Great Lakes, because we're doing these presentations in the Great Lakes region. It's a pretty high number. And then, 99, 100% will say that they've been in a pool. Everyone has been in a pool, and everyone considers themselves a swimmer just by going in a pool. And then we hit them with the pop quiz. We ask 3 simple safety questions that everyone should know the answers to. When we do these presentations, we'll say, this is like the one time you can yell at me today. I want to hear everybody yelling out the answers to these questions. You guys don't have to do this, through the Zoom. But the first question that we ask is, what do you do if your clothes catch on fire? And everyone will yell, stop, drop, and roll, usually in unison without any hesitation. And then we'll ask, what number do you call if there's an emergency? And everyone will scream 911. And then the third and final question to see if the audience passes this safety pop quiz, we'll ask, what do you do if you're drowning? And usually there's a moment of silence, a little bit of a murmur, and then someone might, yell, wait for help, or yell for help, or swim, And the big problem is that we find when we look at the results of this, on average, over 90% of the audience will say that they know how to swim. And on average, less than 5% will know a drowning survival strategy. So that's a huge, huge problem. We need to understand there's a distinction between knowing how to swim versus knowing how to survive. And that's usually, why we start, bring the audience in, is why this information, especially, with high school males, why they should listen to the presentation. Most people fall into the category like, I didn't know. So for me, I didn't know that I could drown even though I knew how to swim. I didn't know that drowning is one of the leading causes of accidental death in the nation and the world. Simple information that just isn't common sense yet. Unfortunately, though, I didn't know is also the #1 thing that we hear from family and friends of drowning victims after a tragic event. Like, I didn't know what the flag system meant on the Great Lakes. Like, a red flag means don't go in the water. I didn't know that there are rip currents in the Great Lakes. I didn't know a drowning survival strategy. I didn't know that swimming isn't enough. So we're going to get into some of these I didn't know bullet points that everyone should know about water safety. A little bit about me, some background information. Since I could crawl, I've been in water. This is a picture of me at the Park Forest Aqua Center. I live in Homewood, Illinois. I still go to the Park Forest Aqua Center when it's open. And unfortunately, though, because of this pandemic, they just posted on Facebook that the pool will be closed for the summer. Also, the Homewood pool, Park District pool here, is also going to be closed for the summer. So that means I'm coming to your beach, as well as everyone else from Illinois is going to be coming to your beach this summer. It's going to be a crowded beach year. We have beach erosion, higher water levels. We have smaller beach space. So there's going to be crowded beaches with people who aren't, common sense water safety. Yeah. So since I could crawl, I've been in water. every summer of my life. I grew up swimming in Lake Michigan, going on 50 years now. I just turned 50 this year, the big 5-0. But every summer of my life, I've been swimming in Lake Michigan. It was late in life that I learned you could surf on Lake Michigan. This is in Chicago, near the Museum of Science and Industry, 57th Street Beach. We can get some really, really good surf conditions if you know when and where to go. This was in Hammond, Indiana. We can get some nice, decent drops. We can get some nice glassy waves. We can get long shoulders to carve when we're surfing. You know, it can get a little icy out there. Our best surf comes in the fall and the wintertime when the wind shift prevailing more from the north, the colder air over warmer water gives us more wind friction. You know, cold falls, heat rises, so colder air traveling over warmer water, that wind is going to make more friction with the water and get a nice surf swell going. Now, when we do go surfing in the wintertime, it's an extreme sport. We're dressing for the water temperature. We have a full wetsuit with a hood, boots, and gloves. Everything is covered except for our face. And, you know, one of the reasons why I like to show this picture is because when you have a bad wipeout, you go over the falls and you have like a 10-foot fall and get the wind knocked out of you, have this wave closing out on you. All that water is flushing in through my face, coming down my arms, down my chest. You know, the suit is really warm, but you get, you know, like 32, 33 degree cold water flushing in through your suit. It's a big shock to the body. And unfortunately, with every extreme sports, accidents do happen. And some years ago, I had an accident while surfing in Lake Michigan. December 26, 2010, I was surfing in Lake Michigan. A lot of people aren't familiar with surfing in Lake Michigan, let alone surfing in the winter in Lake Michigan, because it's cold and it's a day after Christmas. And the ice flow was starting to come into the lineup where the waves were breaking. And I started getting a little nervous. And I was thinking, you know, it's probably time to get out. I'm gonna catch one more wave and I'll be done. And I look over my shoulder and it's like right there. It's a big wave, it's peaking up, and I commit late. What happened is this wave is pushing over, and as I'm committing late, it catapults me and I land flat on my back in the water. And then the next moment, the wave crashes down on me. And so I get the wind knocked out of me, water pouring in my face, coming in through my suit, flushing me with 30-degree cold water, pushing me to the bottom, and I immediately panic. It's a shock to the body. I can't breathe. I'm being held underwater. And I noticed that my surfboard leash is not tugging on my ankle, and realizing that my surfboard, my security blanket in the water, my flotation device, I'm without it. And I make myself up to the surface, and I'm about to try and take a breath, and another wave closes out on me and pushes me to the bottom. And complete panic. All my years of swimming in Lake Michigan at that point of my life of 40 years is out the window. It's complete panic. I get to the surface. I try waving to my two buddies I'm surfing with about 200 yards out. I put my hand up and try to yell, but I'm choking on water. And when I put my hand up, it increases my body weight out of water and pushes me back under. And I'm going underwater, and I'm holding my last breath, and I'm thinking, you know, this is it for me. Gonna be a knock at the door. My parents, and my children, and my wife are gonna be finding out that, you know, I died surfing in Lake Michigan. And also in the same moment, I had this memory recall of an article called "Drowning Doesn't Look Like Drowning" by Mario Batone. And in the article, they describe what the signs of drowning is. It's facing shore, mouth of water level, head tilted back, hyperventilating, doing this climbing ladder motion water. And I realize I'm doing all these signs of drowning. The more that I'm struggling to stay above water, the more I'm sinking and dying and drowning. And I got to the surface of the water, I put my arms out and my feet up, and I floated. I realized I can survive this drowning accident with this wetsuit. I can float, I can stay at the surface. The next problem is these waves are pushing me into the rock wall, where my surfboard is being thrown against it. The rock wall is about 15 feet high. It's all iced over. And I'm thinking, I might not survive that. And I'm realizing, okay, so I got to backstroke. I got to get away from this wall. And as I'm backstroking away from the wall, the waves are pushing me back into the wall. And then when I get close to the wall, there's a current that's pulling me further out. It took me 40 minutes to get out. And when I crawled out, I was like, I'm going to do a community project to promote the signs of drowning. So I'm here today because I survived a drowning incident in Lake Michigan. It was after that drowning incident that I co-founded the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project with Bob Pratt right here. Uh, Bob Pratt is a water safety expert, retired fire marshal from East Lansing, Michigan, lifeguard instructor, CPR trainer, for over 35 years, where he and I connected online, and he was a subject matter expert. I was the organizer and promoter, and we teamed up and we started the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project. Now, the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project, we have 5 key areas of operation. We track the drownings in the Great Lakes. We teach Great Lakes water safety. We work with family and friends of Great Lakes drowning victims to help them advocate water safety. We provide open water surf lifeguard in service training, as well as first responder in service training. And then we also are a water safety, public relations, and media relations campaign. I mentioned that we work with family and friends of drowning victims, and this is the hardest thing that we have to do because we didn't get the safety message to these family members in time for their loved ones. This is 15-year-old Matthew Coker from Tinley Park, Illinois. He was summer between his freshman and sophomore year of high school. He was 6'4", 243 pounds. He played football, basketball, volleyball, 3-sport athlete. He was a straight A student, and he also grew up with swim lessons. So strong, smart, athletic. He knew how to swim, but he didn't know what to do when he got caught in a rip current in New Buffalo, Michigan. This is his mom and dad, Kathy and John Coker. They created the Matthew Coker Foundation in his memory. They're our biggest sponsor of water safety presentations. They've sponsored over 330 presentations in Illinois since his passing. This is 31-year-old Leonel Dominguez with Evelyn Hernandez, one of the co-sponsors of tonight's presentation. They didn't know about offshore winds, that when they took an inflatable raft into Lake Michigan and the wind is blowing from the land out to open water, it can take anything that floats far and fast offshore. And unfortunately, when they got far from shore, Leonel, a big, strong man, great swimmer, 200-mile bike rides, very physically fit, is out of the boat, hanging onto it, trying to swim it back towards shore, exhausted, tries to climb back into the inflatable raft. It tipped, it capsized, the wind takes it up in the air, and now he's exhausted in the water. Evelyn's fresh in the water. As Carmen had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation tonight, a bystander on the beach who had some water rescue experience was swimming out to help them, but unfortunately by the time he got out there, Leonel had submerged and Evelyn was the only person rescued. This is 13-year-old Jermaine Zirkle, Lake Erie, Ohio. Grew up, they have a house on the lake, but they never had any formal water safety education, either in the public or through the schools. And one day when he was with a group of friends swimming on their beach, some rogue waves started coming through from a storm that was far offshore, and it created a structural current around one of their the structures in the water there, and he got caught in that current and was pulled up far from shore. This was 15-year-old Lexia Dew. The last day of school in Chicago a few years ago, her and her girlfriends walked from school to the beach. Waves weren't big that day, but these beaches in Chicago, they have all these break walls to help, to protect the shoreline from erosion. And along these break walls, there can be currents and there can be drop-offs. And unfortunately, she got too close to a wall, got in water over her head, and got pulled out in the current. And unfortunately, this is her father the next day when they recovered her. There's a huge, huge toll on family and friends of Great Lakes drowning victims, as well as all drowning victims, because it's a sudden, unexpected loss. This is a 16-year-old Eliza Trainer. July 1st this year, 2020, she was the first person to drown in Lake Michigan. Her and a boyfriend went to Holland, Michigan. Their first time going to the beach, they had gone out on the pier and there was some wave activity, and they both got swept off the pier. The boy she was with was able to climb out along the rocks. He had a hold of her, but then another wave came, and he lost her. She slipped away. So these are just 5 stories where some simple information could have saved their lives, like knowing what to do in a rip current, knowing that the red flag means don't go in the water, there's rip current activity, understanding about offshore winds, understanding that waves going over the piers can wash you into the water. So I'm here today because I survived a drowning incident while surfing in Lake Michigan. And I'm here today on behalf of family and friends to advocate water safety. But I'm also here today for you because this might be the one and only time that we ever see eye to eye on the screen here, where I can share some simple information that could save your lives or the lives of a loved one. If we go back and look at the survey that we took, how many people know how to swim, how many been in the ocean, how many been in one of the Great Lakes or a pool, and then look at the pop quiz, we find that over 90% of the people will say that they know how to swim, but less than 5% know a drowning survival strategy. So that's a huge, huge problem, especially when we think of how often do we play in fire? Okay, it's kind of a trick question. We never play in fire, but we know a fire survival strategy. Yet we always play in water, and very few people know a drowning survival strategy. So that's really where we need to kind of wake up everybody who goes to any body of water. If we look at what we know and why do we know it, it's because we've had fire drills and tornado drills, school shooter drills, even earthquake drills now in many states, including Illinois and Indiana. And in my lifetime, there hasn't been a fatal earthquake that I'm aware of in Illinois or Indiana, but they're doing earthquake drills in schools now. My son started doing earthquake drills when he was 8 years old in 3rd grade. We need to understand that the big picture of drowning is that it's likely that more school-age children will die drowning each year than die in fires, tornadoes, school shooters, and earthquakes all combined. So it's a huge problem that we really should, suddenly wake up to and start paying more and more attention and become water safety advocates whenever we're around any body of water. According to the World Health Organization, drowning continues to be a neglected public health issue. So you might be hearing this statement for the first time. The statement was made at the end of 2014. It was debuted in 2015. But we need to understand that drowning is a public health issue. We should treat it like a public health issue. It should be funded and educated like a public health issue, but it's not. It's treated like a recreational issue. Recreation is a part of it, but if we treat it as a recreational issue, we fall into the thing where we might blame the victim for having a drowning incident, where that detracts from education, outreach, and funding. According to the World Health Organization, 1 person every 90 seconds, someone somewhere in the world will die drowning. That's over 40 people per hour, over 400,000 people per year at this rate. But new studies have come out that says about 1.2 million people per year will die drowning somewhere in the world. If we narrow down the scope of the drowning statistics, according to the Center for Disease Control, drowning is the leading cause of accidental death for children 1 to 4. So we need to pay very special, close attention to children under the age of 5, because leading cause of accidental death. For children under the age of 1, bathtubs is the leading body of water where drownings may happen. A child's in a little bath seat. The adult is giving the child a bath. The phone rings. The doorbell rings. You think what you're maybe leaving for 10 seconds, but it could easily turn into 1, 2, 5 minutes. So we need to watch them and not get distracted with a young child in the bathtub. For children ages 1 to 4, backyard access to a pool or backyard access to water is the leading body where drownings are happening. So we need to understand the toddler, they're starting to walk, they're exploring, they know their house, they know their backyard, they figure out how to open the door. And if there's not a barrier to the backyard pool or the neighbor's backyard pool or the lake, we need to make sure that we're watching these young children like hawks. If they ever go missing, we're always checking the water first. For children the age of 1 to 14, drowning is the second leading cause of accidental death, second only to car accidents. And for the nation as a whole, drowning is the 5th leading cause of accidental death. Safe Kids Worldwide issued this report last year, and the new findings that they had, which was a little surprising, was that open water, almost half of all drownings, 43%, happen in open water. All the years before, it was always pools. But with pools, technology, engineering, putting up pool fences, having self-locking gates, self-closing gates that lock, having motion detectors, door alarms. Pools have become safer, but open water, almost half of all drownings happen in open water. And looking at Lake Michigan and looking what's going to be special to this year is most public pools are going to be closed or have a delayed opening. The shoreline erosion, more people will be going to the beaches, and these beaches are going to be smaller. There's going to be less sand. There's going to be crowding, even though we're supposed to be social distancing. In addition to that, there's been a huge spike in people buying boats, because how else are you going to social distance if you're on your own boat with your own family? The problem with that is people are going to be buying boats, and they're not going to be getting any, water safety education with that. They're not going to understand the importance of wearing a life jacket in the boat, which we would think would be common sense, but so many people don't wear life jackets. You get in the car, you put on your seatbelt, you don't even think about it. If you're in a boat, especially when you're going from one location to another, you should have a life jacket on, because if you fall out of the boat, if there's some type of an accident, you unexpectedly end up in the water, you want to have that flotation on. You wouldn't put your seatbelt on in the middle of a car accident, just like you wouldn't put your life jacket on in the middle of a boat accident or when you're in the water. I mentioned that we track the drownings in the Great Lakes. On average, almost half of all Great Lakes drownings happen in Lake Michigan. Right now, as of March 20th, 842 drownings in the Great Lakes. Last weekend, a man was recovered from Lake Michigan, last listed in critical condition, so this number will be going up. But on average, almost half of all Great Lakes drownings happen in Lake Michigan, and half of Lake Michigan drownings happen in the south end of Lake Michigan. And this is probably because of the high population density, tourist destination, the configuration of the lake from north to south is about 307 miles long from north to south. So when we get some cold fronts that come through, north winds that come through, the whole south end of Lake Michigan is moving with waves, and I'll show you an animation on that in a little bit. And then what we want to look at, narrowing down these drowning statistics even more, who's drowning more, males and females? And when we're doing a presentation, especially in a high school auditorium, this is kind of where we let the girls beat up on the boys a little bit. We'll ask, ladies, who's drowning more, guys or girls? And they'll always say the guys. But on average, 80% of all drowning victims are male, 4 out of 5. That's a huge, huge problem. And then we'll ask the ladies, why? Why are the boys drowning more? And they usually in unison, just like stop, drop, and roll. When they yell that out, the girls will say, like, guys are stupid or guys are showing off. Now, I want to be fair here, and I'm biased because I'm a male, but I didn't know that 80% of drowning victims were male before I had a drowning incident. It wasn't until I started investigating, started doing these presentations, that I learned this. And we need to understand there's some psychological differences between males and females. Like, males are more likely to take risks, more susceptible to peer pressure, more likely to overestimate their abilities. That's the baseline for these special men's skills: risk takers, peer pressure, overestimating abilities. And then it gets worse. The Red Cross did a report a couple years ago where they had females estimate their swimming ability and they tested them on it. And then they had males estimate their swimming ability and tested them on it. Now, how do you think the females did? They did fantastic. On average, females estimate their swimming ability with almost 100% accuracy, whereas males, we didn't do so good. We overestimated our swimming ability by about 50%. So again, these are our special men's skills. We are risk takers, peer pressure, overestimate ability, and then we get to water and we double down another 50%. And this is usually the time of the presentation where I'll just take a moment to just talk to the guys in the room and say, we need to be very careful not to dare our friends to jump into the deep end of the pool, or to jump off the pier, or swim out to the swim buoy and back. Because even if they can't do it, if they're a poor swimmer, they're likely not going to turn down a dare. And unfortunately, these dares have cost lives in the Great Lakes. So we want everyone to know how to swim, but we want everyone to know their true swimming ability. Everyone's been in a pool, and in a pool, you can have 100% visibility. If you're wearing goggles, you can have consistent warm water temperature. You know where the deep end is. There's no unexpected drop-offs. If you're swimming laps, every 25 yards, there's a wall that you can grab onto and take a rest, or you can do a flip turn, streamline. It's a little bit of a rest. But in the open water, there can be wind and waves and dangerous currents. There can be cold water fluctuation where the temperature drops 10 to 30 degrees. So there's a lot more hazards in the open water than in the pool. If someone wants to be a strong, competitive open water swimmer, they should, train for the environment. Just don't swim in the pool and expect it to be the same when you get into the open water. So we do want everyone to know how to swim. We want people to understand that knowing how to swim has some side effects, like it reduces one's fear of water. And if you have a reduced fear of water, you're more likely to take risk in water. And people often overestimate their abilities in water. Again, males an additional 50%. Knowing how to swim also reduces parental supervision. Like, oh, my child knows how to swim, you don't have to worry about them. Or a child tells you that they know how to swim and that they don't need, your supervision. But we need to understand, most people associate swimming as really, we're waders. We get in the water, we dunk ourselves a couple of times, we're standing in water that we can stand up in, never over our head or rarely over our head. We're throwing a football or a frisbee. We need to understand that swimming is an endurance sport. So in a presentation, oftentimes I'll say, how many people know how to run? And everybody raises their hand, and I'll say, okay, how many know how to run a marathon? And people are, really authentically honest with themselves, like, no way would I ever run a marathon. They put their hands down real quick. It's the same with swimming. Everyone says that they know how to swim, but we need to understand that a drowning incident is a marathon for your life. You have to know how to pace yourself. You have to know, understand it's an endurance sport, and you can tire out very quick swimming in water, and you can tire out even quicker if you're panicked in fear of drowning. A startling statistic is that 66% of all drowning victims were good swimmers. 2/3 of all drowning victims were good swimmers. So that's a huge number. So again, understanding the distinction between knowing how to swim versus knowing how to survive and how to pace yourself. And we'll talk about survival strategy shortly. 54% of Americans don't have the basic swimming ability to save themselves in a water emergency. Now, this was another Red Cross report where they tested people on 5 basic skills, and it was fall in water over your head and be able to resurface, tread water for 1 minute, spin around 360 degrees to spot an exit, swim 25 yards or the length of a pool to get to that exit, and then climb out of the water without any assistance. These are 5 basic skills that people who said that they knew how to swim were tested on, and more than half of them didn't have the endurance or physical ability to complete it. So imagine if you go to the beach and there's 1,000 people there. It's like saying, 540 of them, if there was a water emergency, they wouldn't have the endurance to survive it. So if they get in trouble in water over their head and some wave activities or rip currents, there's a high probability of drowning. 44% of drowning victims never intended to get in the water. They may have just been, going fishing, but they fell out of the boat. They weren't wearing a life jacket. They were fishing off the pier or strolling along the pier. Somehow they fell off. They may have been at the beach and they're just, hanging out, but they decided it's hot, I'm going to go in. They didn't intend to get in the water, but somehow they ended up in the water. And another way a lot of people end up in the water is they become a would-be rescuer. They see someone in trouble. They see a commotion. They want to go in and help, be a good Samaritan. But most often, the would-be rescuer never makes contact with the drowning victim. They just go in the water unprepared, not physically fit, and they just end up in trouble themselves. So we want everyone to know how to swim. We want you to understand, you know, we live most of our lives with no problem in the water or very few problems in the water. But drowning is one of the leading causes of accidental death in the nation and the world. And another contributor to this could be most people don't know what drowning even looks like. So we're going to see a video here. Unfortunately, cartoons, TV shows, and movies have inaccurately portrayed drowning for a long time. It would portray drowning with lots of yelling and waving, splashing, even goofing around. But unfortunately, that's not what drowning looks like. Very little yelling or waving. Unfortunately, TV shows and movies have inaccurately portrayed drowning for a long time. This was an old TV show called Baywatch. It would often portray drowning as easy to predict. The boat won't start, the wave is coming. Of course, it's going to be a drowning incident. But people at the beach are doing their own thing, not paying attention to what other people are doing. Lots of waving, arms up pretty high, head kind of high out of the water. It's almost borderline what drowning could look like. Still hear the yelling as he's running out there. Unfortunately, the inaccurate portrayal of drowning has filtered into beach signs. And this first sign here, kids get really confused with because it says if you see someone drowning, they think that says LOL. But that's a stick figure. 2 hands straight up in the air, head completely out of the water. This one, waist high, arms up in the air, waving. This is in Indiana, Porter's Lakefront Riverwalk, and a couple other beaches. Chest high, arms up in the air, shoulder high, waving, yelling, and unfortunately, this is not what drowning looks like. So the true signs of drowning, we're going to see a series of videos here. We're going to see that drowning looks different for different ages and different swimming abilities. This little boy in the blue shirt with the cup, we can see someone with no swimming ability could step in water over their heads and just simply submerge. No waving, no yelling. And a disclaimer, everyone's rescued in these videos. Luckily, the cameraman saw what happened, jumps in the water, rescues the young boy. In this swim lesson, there's a platform where they do the lessons. The boy jumps in without the instructor, steps off the platform, and he's drowning. He's not yelling for help. He's not waving for help. Luckily, the instructor's right there to assist him. A little peer pressure in this video. The boy was dared to jump into the pool. It's 9 feet deep, well over his head. And he goes right to drowning. The cameraman has no idea that he's drowning. The cameraman's going to be laughing throughout the video. His friend's coming to help and try and give him some assistance. They're only a couple feet from safety. But as soon as he feels his friend trying to help him, he just turns and grabs, puts his friend underwater. Now his friend's in distress and just wants to get away from him. But he's still in arm's reach and he grabs him again. The girl's going to be a little smarter, hanging onto the wall, doing a reach assist. But as soon as he feels her, he just turns and grabs, pulls her off the wall. But luckily now they're at the wall where they're all able to get out of the water. So a drowning victim is in panic mode, and a drowning victim can drown the rescuer. In this situation, this has been going on for a little while. This is the lifeguard swimming out. He handed off his rescue tube to another drowning victim. He's swimming far out. This guy was in a rip current. But this guy's not yelling or waving for help. He's so exhausted by the time he sees this lifeguard coming out to get him that he doesn't fight with the lifeguard anymore. Lifeguard's able to signal for help. So we need to understand that the true signs of drowning is typically facing shore, mouth at water level, head tilted back, the body's vertical, and they're doing this climbing the ladder motion with their hands and legs. Either like they're climbing the ladder or they're pawing with both hands at the side. This was exactly what I was doing when I had my drowning incident. And we need to understand that panic is the first stage of drowning. And if you don't know how the impact of panic, it causes you to hyperventilate. It causes you to extremely exert yourself. You exhaust yourself really, really fast. And again, a panicking person, a drowning person can drown someone who's trying to help them. But you can see her eyes are right here bugging out through these glasses. She was drowning. You might only see a person's head at the surface of the water. If someone has hair in their face, it's a telltale sign that, the natural thing to do is you just wipe that hair away. If somebody's drowning, facing shore, mouth of water, the head tilted back, hair in their face, they need something that floats immediately. This girl was drowning in Lake Michigan, and she's got this posture almost picture perfect. Mouth of water, the head tilted back, her body is vertical. She's doing a little bit of pawing at the sides of the water. She was eventually rescued. So if you're ever struggling in water over your head, we advocate that you flip, float, and follow. You flip over on your back and you float. You float to keep your head above water. You float to calm yourself down from the fear and panic of drowning. You float to conserve your energy. And then you follow a safe path out of the water. If you want to survive a drowning incident, you must stay at the surface and continue breathing. There's no rocket science here. So you have to stay at the surface by either floating with a flotation device or floating on your own. So flip, float, and follow. It's a life-saving motto for those struggling in water. We want people to know it just like they know stop, drop, and roll. And follow is where we get the most questions. What does follow mean? It means follow the safest path out of the water. But which way is the safest path? So we want everyone to know right now that every drowning incident is going to be unique to the body of water, the condition of the water, and the ability of the person in the water. So we don't have this is the one path to follow in every situation. The bottom line, though, is if you want to survive a drowning incident, you have to stay at the surface, continue breathing, float until you get your breathing under control, calm yourself down from that panic. It's a marathon to get out of the water, so you have to conserve your energy. And then follow a safe path for exit of the water, to signal for help or to continue floating until rescue arrives. So we need to understand why it's so important to understand what drowning looks like and understand the process of drowning. If someone is struggling in water, typically less than 1 minute until final submersion, that little boy in blue stepped in water over his head and he went right under. That other boy in the swim class, he maybe would have lasted 20 or 30 seconds if no one was there to assist him. The teenager in the pool probably would have lasted about a minute if his friends weren't there giving him any assistance. So we need to understand that drowning is silent, it's swift. Not going to be a lot of waving or yelling, what you might expect from seeing in the movies. Once someone submerges, if we can get them out of the water within 2 minutes, it's about a 94% survival rate if we're giving them rescue breaths and CPR properly. So 94% survival rate in less than 2 minutes of submersion is a really great survival rate. But around 3 minutes of submersion, the heart may stop. Around 4 minutes of submersion, irreversible brain damage may begin. And around 10 minutes of submersion, if we're then getting this person out of the water, giving them rescue breaths and CPR properly, it's only about a 14% survival rate. So we need to understand there's a very small window of rescue for saving a person's life if they're drowning. And flotation is the key to interrupt the drowning process, getting them something that floats immediately. Under 2 minutes of submersion could be a full recovery. Unfortunately, 10 minutes of submersion is likely a body recovery. And we need to understand that rescue breaths are the priority for a drowning victim. We need to understand that drowning does not stop until we restore oxygen to the brain. Rescue breaths are a priority. Many people may have heard of compression-only CPR, which is good for an old guy up to my age now. I'm on dry land, I fall down, I'm having a heart attack. I have oxygen in my lungs. Someone runs up, they start doing chest compressions. Someone's getting an AED, someone's calling 911. You guys are buying time for me to continue breathing and pumping my heart until first responders arrive. If someone's pulled out of the water unconscious, they likely used up all of the oxygen in their blood. They need the rescue breaths and the compressions. In the United States, the routine is 2 breaths, 30 compressions, repeat. But in many other countries and many like open water lifeguards that I've worked with, 5 breaths, 30 compressions, repeat. And now comes the challenge of the era of the coronavirus, where we're going to make sure that these lifeguards have a barrier, that they have a rescue mask for, giving these breaths in the water or pulling them out of the water. We're waiting for updates and guidelines to come, but either way, if a person is drowning and being pulled out of the water unconscious, they have to have rescue breaths. So some guard stations may be having bag valve masks, which would be ideal. Having oxygen tanks on the beaches, probably not going to be conducive for the heat. So having an emergency response plan for quick access to getting the breathing restored is very, very important. A quick review of what we talked about so far. We need to understand that drowning is a public health issue. It's a neglected public health issue. It's one of the leading causes of accidental death in the nation and the world. Leading cause for children 1 to 4, second leading cause for children 1 to 14, fifth for the nation as a whole. Understand what drowning looks like for 3 key reasons. So you can spot someone in a crowd who's drowning. So you understand that it's time critical. We want to get them something that floats before submersion. And then if you're ever doing the signs of drowning yourself, stop doing the signs of drowning and flip, float, and follow. We're going to shift gears here a little bit, and we're going to talk about Lake Michigan. From north to south is about 307 miles long. From east to west is about 118 miles at its widest point. Gary, Indiana is down here. New Buffalo's over here. Beverly Shores is right along down in here. So this is a long lake. When we go to the beach, we really want to pay attention to the wind, because we're going to understand that winds equals dangerous currents. And more specifically for the south end of the lake, winds equals waves equals dangerous currents. If we look at this chart again, the dark blue is 0 feet, green 5 feet, yellow 10 feet. This is an animation. This is the animation where the north winds turn on and the surf swell moves all the way down the lake, peaking at almost 14 feet. When the winds turn off, the waves will subside. The winds may shift directions. Now it's a south wind and it's moving to the north, so the surf swell is going north. The winds die off again. Winds are turning west, starting to shift northwest. So we need to understand that the wind is the culprit here. Whenever we're going to the beach, we want to know whether it's going to be sunny, is it going to be hot, but is it going to be windy? And which way the wind is blowing is going to have an impact of the types of hazards you could have in this Lake Michigan surf environment. We can have calm days and we can have huge days. And on these huge days, we can have epic wave events where these waves are hitting these piers. They're going, splashing higher than these lighthouses, washing along these bike paths. This is downtown Chicago, Lake Shore Drive. One thing we do need to understand, though, is that waves 6 feet or taller usually scare people smart to stay out of the water, stay away from the water. We do have some drownings on these huge epic wave events, but it's the small swell that comes through. Maybe a 1-day or half-day swell event where the waves are anywhere from 2 to 5 feet. Not real big, but if we look at the waves from this wave to this wave, we call it a short wave period. It might only be 3 seconds. So if it's a 3-foot wave at 3 seconds, this guy's in chest deep water. He gets pulled off 10 feet, off the sandbar. Now he's in water over his head. He starts to panic. And every 3 seconds, there's a wave hitting him over the head. If we look at the dynamics of the wave, the crest is the high point, the trough is the low point, the wave height is the distance from the crest to the trough. But we want to look at the wave period here. Let's say that this is 15 seconds from the crest of this wave to the crest of this wave. In the ocean, you could see waves like this coming long on the horizon, where these waves are nice, even, long lines. It's very predictable where it's going to break, where the water is getting shallower. And actually, in this picture here, it might be 30 seconds from this wave to this wave. But when we get on the Great Lakes, a 3-foot wave every 3 seconds, now the ocean sample, 15 seconds, 2 waves. We have Great Lakes, 15 seconds, we have 5 waves. So it's a high frequency wave. The waves just keep breaking as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They just keep coming. As long as the wind is blowing, these waves keep rolling. They might not be that big, but because of the high frequency, we can have strong currents that open up. Haphazard, disorganized breaking everywhere, but it's days like this, you know, the waist deep water, maybe 2, 3 foot waves, where more people are going to be in the water. This would be considered a yellow flag day. More people in the water, more probability of something happening. But it's days like this that we could have the most drownings on the Great Lakes. And then these waves along these piers can be very dangerous. If you can see, there's a girlfriend and a boyfriend. They both have brand new mountain bikes with their matching I Love Grand Haven sweatshirts on. There's another guy out on the water there, on the pier there. A wave washes over, knocks the girl down. Her bike is right here, sinking in the water. Probably the one time where the man's being smart, standing a safe distance away, guarding his bike. Another wave comes, he's losing his bike. She's going in the water. She does go in the water. His bike goes in the water. Luckily, she does pop back up. He's able to grab her, but they lose their bikes this day. They easily could have lost their lives. We've got 3 people here out on this pier, and this picture was taken a couple years ago. The water's actually much higher now this year in the Great Lakes. We also have the photographer over here. That's 4 people far out on this pier with waves breaking over, all putting their lives in danger without even realizing it. More people further down the pier, more people at the base. It becomes contagious. It's an attractive nuisance. People want to get out on these piers. And then we have this video here. I'll let it roll.
It is home video that starts out normal. A family enjoying the big lake in Grand Haven on their boat Saturday. But things were about to change, and change fast. They watched a small group on the pier when suddenly someone was swept into the churning Lake Michigan. Look at those people. Look at the girl just went in. Watch again. We're slowing it down here as the force of the water takes a young lady right off the pier. Instantly, the boaters knew this was an emergency. Oh my God, she's in the water. Call the boat guy. That's the voice of Brad Richter. His wife and cousin were on the boat with him.
When you see somebody like that get wiped off, you're just like, you're kind of helpless in a way.
The waves pushed the team further out into the water. What would ordinarily have made the struggle worse made the Richter's ability to rescue her just right.
Everything worked out where I got it right up there where it needed to be. She stayed right there, and they grabbed her, and she was in the boat. And it was like, everybody just sat there, like I said, and it was like, whoa.
Incredibly, the woman whose life was in peril moments before was able to simply walk away from this ordeal, seeking no medical attention at the time.
Lake Michigan.
So these waves can be very dangerous along the shoreline, as well along these piers and structures and roads and bike paths that could be, you know, getting water activity now because of the higher water levels. One thing we may start to see is it all depends on the ice formations in the wintertime and the sandbar formations. But we could have, I know there's some beaches where I surf at where the sandbars got washed off. So the water breaks right on the shoreline. And this is what would be an undertow, where the water's pulling back out and the next wave is coming in. It's not pulling you under, it's pulling you from the shoreline to the water's edge. But again, it can sweep you off your feet. This is more likely in oceans, but I do know that there's some beaches that I surfed at where, because of the sandbars got washed off, I might be 5 feet offshore, but I'm in 10 feet of water along the shoreline. So we need to understand that if somebody's struggling along the shoreline, it might not look like they're struggling. This guy is, you know, kind of giggling about it still. But this woman, she's had enough now. She's ready to get out. It's exhausting. You want to make sure that if you're helping someone out of the water, that you get them to the dry sand, completely out of the water. So luckily they're able to all get her out of the water and up to the dry sand. Waves breaking along the shoreline can create rip currents. Most people are familiar with this sign. There's a sandbar along the shoreline where it's shallower. The waves are coming towards shore. They break along the sandbar. They rise up the beach. They recede. There's a trough in a sandbar where the water's all flowing out. And this is a time-lapse video where a dye pack was released in the water. What we need to understand with the rip current, it's going to pull you away from shore. It's not going to pull you underwater. People fight the current, they get exhausted. But once the current gets out beyond breaking waves, it's just going to stop. And it's just going to sit there. But now you're far from shore. So we need to understand that if someone is pulled out in a rip current, the fatal instinct is, I was just standing up right here. Now I'm being pulled away from shore. I want to get out of this as soon as I can. They fight the current. They don't realize it's like a treadmill. They exhaust themselves and then submerge. So if you're ever being pulled out in a rip current, you want to flip over on your back and float, realize you're being pulled away from shore, swim parallel to shore, out of the current, and then back to shore. We can have outlet currents where it's a river or a creek moving out into the water. It's similar to like a rip current. It's pulling you away from shore. Don't fight the current. Float, go parallel to shore, and then back to shore. Indiana Dunes State Park has an outlet current. Warren Dunes down the beach has an outlet current. So wherever a river or creek is flowing out into the water, and it could even be a boat harbor or a boat channel could have a current that's flowing out. Don't ever fight the current. Float with the current. Realize which way it's pulling you. Go parallel back to shore. A longshore current, the wind and waves are hitting the beach at an angle, creates a current that's going parallel to shore. The escape strategy is don't fight the current, just go straight back out of the water. You've probably been in a longshore current and never known it. If you ever go to the beach and you put down your towel, you go in the water, and then 10 minutes later, you're 20 yards down the shore, you're in a longshore current. Usually not a big hazard for adult-sized people, but young children could walk out onto a shallow sandbar. It may not be very wavy. It could just be a little bit of a wind current that's pushing the water down the shore. It can go from, waist high for a toddler to chest high on an adult. The child gets in water over their head. These longshore currents become the most dangerous current when they go down the beach and they hit a pier or a structure. Can wash people off the pier, and if somebody gets in the water here, it could slam them into the pier. These waves will be going into the pier and receding, crescendoing back out. Portage, Indiana, Portage Lakefront and Riverwalk, Ogden Dunes. A lot of beaches now, because they don't have a beach anymore, they have these break walls that if we have waves going into these break walls, it's very turbulent. And someone, we need flotation devices there, throw rings, call boxes, so we can call 911. We need to be able to get someone flotation and buy them time for professional rescuers to arrive. This illustration just illustrates nothing is going on. This is the sandbar formations. There's a break in the sandbar, which could be a trough or a drop off for somebody who's playing out on a sandbar. But the break in the sandbar is from a previous outlet current, break in the sandbar from a previous rip current, break in the sandbar from a previous structural current. If we put northwest wind and waves on this, it's very active. We have several types of currents all in one small area. Longshore currents can flow into the outlet current. Longshore currents can flow into the rip current. Longshore currents can flow into the structural current. And we need to realize that there could be a channel current and there can be a structural current on both sides. This would be the windward side where the waves are crashing into it. This would be the leeward side where the water is going to be calmer, but there still will be a current flowing along the pier. And then this is just going to continue up to the next beach. So if we look at Lake Michigan, if you're in Wisconsin and you're at the beach, you're looking east. If you're in Michigan, you're looking west. If you're in Gary, you're looking north. So we kind of can say we've got an east coast, a west coast, the south coast, and north coast of Lake Michigan. So depending which way the wind is blowing and where you are in relation to it, several types of hazards. So to simplify this, whenever you go to the beach, let's just say we're going to down in Gary, because that's be the next slides coming up. whenever you go to the beach, try and take notice of which way the wind is blowing, and don't worry about north, south, east, or west. Just think, is it blowing onshore or offshore? Or is it side onshore or side offshore? And, you know, and remember that the current is going to be going with the wind. So if we have north winds coming down the lake, that's north winds coming 300 miles all the way to the south end of the lake. We can have your traditional water is going to be pushing up the beach, it's going to be curling back out. You have your traditional rip currents that's pulling out in between the breaking waves. But if it's a northwest wind, you can have a longshore current that's going parallel to the shore from the west to the east, and you can have side offshore rip currents flowing. And if it's the opposite direction, northeast winds, you can have a longshore current going from east to west with rip currents flowing side offshore. The good news is you don't have to remember the names of any of these currents, just which way is the wind blowing, onshore, offshore, side offshore combination. Understand that all these currents are like a treadmill. You never win on a treadmill. You run your distance, you run your time, you press the button, you step off the treadmill. If you ever get caught in any dangerous current in any body of water, don't fight the current. Flip over on your back and float and try to discern which way the current is taking you, and then swim perpendicular to the flow. If you're too tired to swim, or if you're a poor swimmer, just continue swimming. Continue floating. Try to signal for help. And then at the beach, again, winds equals waves equals dangerous currents. With offshore winds, if the wind is blowing offshore, inflatable objects will flow offshore. So if we look at this alligator, the wind is blowing side offshore. This is New Buffalo, Michigan. That alligator is just going to keep on going. So if there's a child having a tantrum that he wants his parent to go get it, the parent should let it go. Unfortunately, people have perished going after inflatable devices. It's just going to keep going. There's no point to try to catch it. And this was last summer in Michigan City, Indiana. There's a boy on this inflatable duck. Now this incident happened about 5 minutes sooner than where the video takes up. But we got 3 people in the water here. I apologize if you see some little squiggly thing here and there, but there's 3 people out in the water trying to rescue this toddler on the duck. And it's flowing in the wind farther and faster than they can go after it. Nobody on the beach knows there's a water emergency going on. They're just doing their thing because, you know, people aren't trained to be lifeguards to, you know, watch what's going on. But this toddler is having a tantrum because he knows he's alone out there. He's eventually rescued. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit further because this is a 6-minute video. I was going out on a stand-up paddleboard to rescue the boy. The boy had arm floaties on. He didn't have a life jacket on. This boat was rescuing these would-be rescuers. And as I was getting closer to the boy on the inflatable duck, he ends up falling off, and I started screaming for the boat to get there now. The boy had fallen off. One person jumped off the boat way too early. Another person's about to jump off the boat. But we got there as, you know, the boy was struggling to stay at the surface with arm floaties on, just inflatable arm floaties. Luckily, it kept him surface long enough for the people on the boat to get to him and get him out of the water. So things that float: beach balls, children on rafts, children on inner tubes, even a football. These things will flow far and fast offshore in an offshore wind or side offshore wind. We shouldn't have inflatables at the beach when there's a side offshore wind or an offshore wind. So we created this illustration shortly after that drowning incident that, nationwide, there was other incidences of someone on a unicorn and a flamingo, kids being, caught in offshore winds, and even adults being caught in offshore winds on inflatable devices. So again, One other side note to offshore winds: if the wind's blowing offshore, inflatables will flow offshore. But the warm water at the shoreline, you might have a heat wave where it's calm and hot, and we could have like 80-degree water at the shoreline. That offshore wind will blow that warm water offshore, and cold water will upwell. So just understanding that you can go to the beach one day and you could have water temps at 75 degrees, but if there's strong offshore winds overnight or during the day while you're there, that the water temperatures can drastically change just because the wind is blowing offshore. And then SAISH is a phenomenon. It's kind of rare, but it seems to happen more, but it doesn't happen in large, like a tsunami type of event. But back in 2003, I think 7 people drowned in Lake Michigan, near Sawyer, Michigan, Warren Dunes. What happens is a fast-moving storm is coming across the lake. Sudden increase in air pressure could create a large wave. This was 1954, where they say that a 7-foot wave hit New Buffalo, did a bank shot. By the time it hit Chicago, it was over a 10-foot wave. Over 80 rescues were made that day, and several drowning incidents in Chicago, boats overturned. And there's a video here that this reporter will explain it a little bit better than I just did.
Well, Brian, with more and more people heading out to the beach, there are a couple of different types of waves that are rare and dangerous that we need to know about because they can form when severe thunderstorms move over the lake. Meteotsunamis and seishes are 2 different types of rare waves that don't happen often on the Great Lakes, but when they do, they can either wow us or pose as a deadly threat. A meteotsunami most recently occurred in Ludington, Michigan on April 13th. Maybe you saw these photos of the Ludington Pier captured by Todd and Brad Reed. The first photo looks like the lake is empty, and the second shows water submerging the pier. Within 42 minutes, the water in Lake Michigan is said to have potentially risen around 10 feet. When the water came in to submerge the pier, models have shown that a meteotsunami occurred. The red colors show abnormally large waves that moved onshore. A meteotsunami is a large wave that forms due to the weather overhead. Strong thunderstorms can create big changes in air pressure and strong winds. If the thunderstorm is moving fast enough, over 60 miles per hour, a meteotsunami can form. These waves come in quick. On July 4th of 2003, a meteotsunami moved into the Warren Dunes, and due to subsequent rip currents, 7 people drowned. A seiche forms due to the same variables, thunderstorms in the vicinity that cause changes in air pressure and strong wind. But it's not one of the fast-moving waves like a meteotsunami. During a seiche, the water within the lake sloshes around from one side of the lake to the other over a longer period of time. It's commonly mistaken for high and low tide. The water may take a couple hours to retreat from and then return to the shore. It can cause rip currents, flooding, or unexpected changes in water depth. These 2 types of waves can be dangerous, and they can cause deaths across the lake and damage. Not only at the Warren Dunes have they caused deaths, but also in Holland, Grand Rapids, and in Chicago. Meteorologists are still trying to learn how to forecast for meteotsunamis and seishes, but until then, all we can do is know when there's going to be severe weather before you head out to the beach. Live in St. Joseph, I'm ABC 57 First Warning Neighborhood Meteorologist Erica Horvatine.
So I would say a summation for seishes and meteotsunamis. It's still brand new. Meteotsunami was a term that was just created like 2 years ago. Severe weather crossing the lake can have a huge impact, and we can understand that, you know, it might be sunny on the south end of the lake, but a severe storm passing over the north end of the lake could have water fluctuations or like a tsunami type of wave hitting the south end. So just being, you know, vigilant of understanding the weather conditions, and then understanding a storm 200-300 miles away on the north end of the lake could have an impact on conditions on the south end. And again, if you're ever caught in some currents from these waves, flip over on your back and float. Even better yet, if you can, always bring life jackets with you to the beach. You know, you can wear them in the water, and they're comfortable to float in, and they're even, some of them are even fashionable now. So going into water safety, Some beaches have beach flags, some don't. And unfortunately, there's no uniform code on the Great Lakes of how they should be managed or what they even mean. We're just going to associate them as just one water safety tool in the toolbox. They're similar to like a stoplight. Green does not mean go. Green means proceed with caution, but you should always have caution whenever you're on any body of water. Yellow is medium hazards, some currents, and red is, high frequency of currents and wave activities. Really should not go in the water. It's not a good day to go swimming. It's always safer to swim near a lifeguard. According to the United States Life Saving Association, you have a 1 in 18 million chance of drowning at a beach with a USLA lifeguard. When we go to schools and do presentations, we kind of hammered into the kids. When I was in high school, if there was lifeguards or any type of authority, we avoided them as much as possible, and we didn't swim near lifeguards. The role of the lifeguard is to watch the water, to make rescues, give first aid and assistance. They're not there to hassle people. If somebody's putting themselves or others in a dangerous situation, they're there to intervene and to educate. So it's always safer to swim near a lifeguard. And it's always wise to designate a water watcher. Safe Kids USA created this water watcher tag many years ago. Many organizations have adopted it, but you can print out the tag, put it on a necklace, and while wearing this tag, I agree to supervise the children in open water or pool, keeping them in sight at all times. I will not leave the water area without finding an adult to replace me. So if I'm the water watcher, I got the necklace on, I know the responsibility of watching the water, but now it's my turn to go get a cheeseburger. I can take it, I can put it on another adult physically, I can read them the tag so that they fully understand the responsibility of watching the water, and that if they need to leave the water, they need to get the kids out of the water, or they need to assign another adult supervisor as a water watcher. Understand what the signs of drowning are. Understand drowning is one of the leading causes of accidental death. Drowning doesn't look like drowning. Person's typically facing shore, mouth at water level, head tilted back. Their body is vertical. They might be doing a climbing the ladder motion. Understand it so you can spot someone in a crowd who's struggling and needs something that floats. Understand it so you know that it's time critical. If this person submerges, the clock is ticking. We have less than 10 minutes to get them out of the water for survivability. And if you're ever struggling in water over your head, flip, float, and follow. Some beaches have adopted some of our illustrations, but it's very wise to have some type of signage at your beach discussing the water hazards specific to your beaches, like if it's an open water for rip currents, for structural currents, having a water rescue device such as a throw ring or a throw bag, and also having like a mile marker on the stand. So if there's an incident, and having these, posts coordinated with your local police and fire department. I'm at rescue stand number 2. I threw a throw ring out to somebody. They're being pulled out in a rip current. They have the rescue throw ring with them, but they're on their own floating out with this device. So they have a location for the first responders to respond to. They know where they're going. Understanding there's several types of dangerous currents. You don't need to know the names of the currents, just know you don't ever fight a current. Flip over on your back and float. Try and realize which way you're being pulled from perpendicular to the flow. And then water rescue. What we advocate is that if you don't have lifeguard training and you don't have lifeguard equipment and you're not currently physically fit as a lifeguard, nobody should be getting in the water to make a rescue. Water rescue is very dangerous. Would-be rescuers often become drowning victims without ever making contact with the drowning victim. And while we give that advice, we know people will ignore it because it's their best friend or a family member. So if you ever decide to get in the water to help somebody, take something with you that floats because you will likely need it, if not for the victim, but for yourself.
Dave?
Yep.
This is Evelyn. I just wanted to make sure that we have some time to let people
Okay.
ask questions. So if you,
I'm just about wrapped up.
okay.
Reach something to a person, throw something to a person, don't go. Throw bags can be thrown a great distance with pretty good accuracy. They don't give a lot of flotation. If someone, has some swim ability, you can pull them to shore. Michigan City, Indiana has these throw rings in these weatherproof cases. Other piers and beaches do have throw rings. Wall Street Beach in Gary, Indiana, and the Gary, Indiana beaches have them. You can throw it a pretty good distance. You could get more than one throw by throwing the flotation device. If you miss on the first throw, you could possibly get it to them on the second throw. Anything that floats is key. Some beaches have rescue equipment stands with throw rings, lifeguard tubes, the Carlson board. Some beaches may have nothing, but there's always something that floats at the beach. When you're going to the beach, there could be, a cooler has a lot of flotation, a soccer ball, football has enough flotation for an adult-sized person to keep afloat. Can be thrown great distance, great accuracy. People may be bringing boogie boards or surfboards. Great devices, but tell the surfer to go make the rescue. Don't just commandeer their equipment. And people may be bringing life jackets to the beach. If you ever enter the water, take something with you that floats. If it's a life jacket, put it on. If you make contact with a person in the water, keep the flotation between you and them. As you can see, this young male with his future ex-girlfriend, he's using her as a flotation device until Lexi comes out with his boogie board and is able to keep them both afloat. I'm going to run through these series of pictures real quick. Grand Haven, Michigan, this girl was in trouble. This guy is going out with the throw ring. He's getting pummeled by a wave right here. She's struggling in the water. She is drowning. He's able to get the throw ring to her, pull her to shore, get her out of the water, and then she says that her friend is still out there. And her friend is now way out here. Now there's a couple other surfers in the water who are getting involved in the rescue. She was unconscious and not breathing. She had submerged. She's not floating. She was just kind of rolling around in the water. Zeb Birkschool from Grand Haven, Michigan was able to get to her. Again, she is unconscious and not breathing. He's able to bring her to shore, hand her off to first responders, where they were able to get her on the shore, start immediately giving her rescue breaths, and she immediately, sat up and was conscious. A week later, they gave several of the rescuers awards for their heroism in this rescue, and this is one of the happy stories on the Great Lakes. So I kind of sped it up at the end. I know I covered a lot of information. If anyone has any questions, let me know.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This is Susan Thomas. You covered that program where people have a tag and they're the designated watcher, and then they have to hand it off. That seems like such an amazing idea that should be implemented everywhere. Is that being implemented now? I've never seen that.
It's kind of like on your own. Some organizations have adopted it. Some beaches may have adopted it.
I get back on.
You can Google Water Watcher card and go to Safe Kids USA, and you can print out a template, or you can have, you might be able to find a local business who would want to sponsor them and print them out and hand them out, Memorial Day weekend or at special events, or at access points to parking lots, reminding people that they should watch the water and always have a designated water watcher.
Thank you.
Can't hear you, Annette. You're on mute. Gotta go to the mute button.
Dave,
Yes.
can you unshare the screen?
Oh, yes.
There we are. Okay, everyone, I have unmuted you.
Somebody has the TV on, I think.
Hold on, maybe I'll mute everybody. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Yeah, okay. Dave, that was unbelievable. Thank you so much. Yeah, as you can see in the comments, we have so many people that are so appreciative. I'm overwhelmed with all the stories. Evelyn, of course, your personal story. Thank you, Carmen and Evelyn, for bringing Dave to us. And any other questions?
Is it, Dave, I mean, I don't know that you know the answer to this, but you mentioned the break walls that Chicago has, and I'm a Chicagoan, but living here in Miller. What's the cost involved for the Southern Shore here to get some real break walls that would not only help with erosion, but might break up some of that wave action that you were talking about? You're on mute. You're muted, Dave. You're muted.
No.
Here we go. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I don't know the cost of the construction of break walls, unfortunately.
Okay, next.
Sounds like a winner, yeah.
They can hear us.
Do we have any other questions? And many of you are unmuted, or I'm unmuting all of you. So just be careful, you're unmuted so you can ask your question. Okay, thank you, Dave. Yeah.
Thank you.
Where do we go
Sorry,
from
we're a
here?
little long.
Oh, it's okay. I think that the information is terrific, and thank you.
Great. Thank you.
It was excellent.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
And
for tuning in.
yes,
Thank you,
Thank you
Evelyn.
so much.
Thank
That
you,
was great.
Carmen.
thank you. Yeah,
Thank
comment.
you, Carmen. Thank you, Evelyn.
You
Thank
all.
you, Dave.
Okay.
Well, thanks
Thank
again.
you, Annette.
Okay,
Okay.
turn it off.
Carmen, are you still here? Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.